So we're back in the workshop then on with the lawn mower project, and today we're going to take a look at putting the engine in the chassis, getting that mounted, and then have a look at the steering as well and figure out what we're going to do with the steering column and stuff. More stuff. Currently we've spent nothing apparently. So I've got this on the shelf, which is a 90-degree steering box, or a 90-degree box, 1-to-1, and they go in the same. Do they go in the same direction? No, they don't. They go opposite direction. No, they don't. They go. If I turn that way, that's going that way. Is that right?
No, that's going to turn you right.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, that's right. So we're going to use that to replace this sort of old school rack and pinion, purely because it's missing teeth. And it's just not going to be strong enough for once we've got these bigger wheels on, and we'll be bouncing around with a lot more weight on it and stuff like that. It's just not going to be strong enough, so we'll get rid of that. It means we can move the steering wheel and stuff around, and that'll be really strong.
Basically, we're on with building the seat now. So we've got a set of mounting rails, I think out of one of the Can-Ams, and we're going to sort of do something different here and actually weld the rails to the bottom of the seat and then attach the brackets to the mower. So I'm going to get on with just welding these on and then cut them back so that they fit properly. So now that I've welded the rails onto the bottom of the seats, we're going to use these brackets and drill a couple of holes. The idea is to have these mounted here, which will then attach to the bottom of the seat rails, and then have the back of the seat rail attached here, which should allow us to mount the seats somewhat like that.
So this is the Honda VTR engine that we're going to put in the front of the lawnmower. It's a 1000cc V-twin. It's like a 90-degree V, so it's quite wide in that sense. But we're going to run it in that orientation like that. We're going to drop it in the chassis now and see where everything lands. We've got a bunch of mounting points in different places. There's a really good one there, which we'll use. And then there's a couple over here, some down lower at what will be the front. But we need to chuck it on there, get it in the position that we want it, try and get it as far back as possible so we don't end up with this super long thing, and see where we go from there.
What, are ready for dropping it, yeah?
Yeah. Just move that, because that's going to get chopped and then we'll never be able to find one of them again.
Yep, got it.
Sweet. Nice. So we've dropped it in here. I'm pretty happy with the position of it, and then we've pushed it back in between the existing structure of the lawnmower there, and it fits nicely between there. So I've drilled a hole through, and that's landed really nice and picked up off the existing mount on the back. So we can strengthen that end up, run that as the rear mount, and then we've just got to build a front mount now. Nice. So that's the rear mount that we've dropped in, and we've got the sump lifted up off the chassis, so we've got clearance there. And now I'm going to make up a front mount that's going to pick up off of these two big ones and then these two here, I think, and then drop it down to the chassis. So we've got it mounted at the rear and at the front then. That should be pretty solid. So I'm going to go off of that one at the top, and then I'm also going to go off that one there, I think. I'm just going to have to notch that round. I'm drilling these washers so they they've given me something good to mount to, and then I'm going to, so I'll go drop down to there and then to there. So I can weld a bit of tube on there, and that still lets you get to the bolt, but then I can pick up more tube to come up here, do a similar sort of thing there, and then go up to the top as well, and that'll give me my mount for the front. Do the same on both sides, and then I don't think it's going anywhere. So I've now got 3 solid tubes to mount up off. So I'm literally just going to join them up now, and then when that's all bolted in, that'll be nice and strong. Hey, can you see that? Does these 2 tubes look in line?
Go that way.
In?
Yeah. Yeah, but you're doing that on the top.
As long as the bottom's the same, yeah. Ow. Right, wants to go that way.
Yeah, just a little bit. More than that.
More?
Yeah.
Nice. Mount made for this side, which will drop in there nicely. I'm just going to bolt this on and then do the same the other side. Bolted on there now on this side, so I'm just going to do the same the other side. Get that bolted on and we're done. We can now look at fitting the steering box. Didn't want to get on with doing this because we didn't know where the engine was going to sit, and we didn't want the engine to interfere with this or vice versa. Incidentally, there's a ton of room down here because of the shape of the engine. There's loads of room here, and the rack comes down quite neatly by the engine. So we're thinking, with that being 90 degrees, but then the steering column going off there, we're going to put UJ in here and then mount that so that it runs to the front axle. It's going to go under the chassis so that this shaft runs underneath the engine, and then we'll probably shove it as far forward as we can to reduce the angle on the UJ. That's roughly where the steering wheel is going to sit. We've spaced it up about 3 or 4 inches there to get a good position when you're in the seat. So now all we've got to do is get a UJ from the end of that column onto that and mount this as well. The box comes with these bolt-on ends, which we can machine up, and then that will allow us to weld something to them, UJ or shaft or whatever we need to make it all work. They're called star couplings apparently. So I've got a UJ there that's got that size diameter, which didn't fit in the star coupling here. So I've machined the star coupling so that now that pushes into the star coupling, and I can get it straight and then weld it up, and then the whole thing can, the star coupling and the UJ, which are now one thing, can unbolt from the shaft and bolt on.
So for mounting the steering box to the mower, just whipped up some piece of angle iron with some holes in it, and then that'll allow us to hopefully mount this about there, which will keep the output for the shaft level with these 2 holes that we already have in the front of the mower to put the steering shaft in.
Cool, and while he was doing that, I was doing bits on the lathe. So I've machined that down so that it will fit in this end of the UJ like that, and then we can pinch it down, and then when Harry's bolted that in. That'll go on there, that'll go on there. And then this end will go on the other bit that I had that I've lost, which is there. So that'll drop into there, and then we can weld that up. So that'll be one piece that one end goes onto the steering column and the other end goes onto the 90-degree box. So we're just going to assemble that now, weld this up and make it fit. So I've machined that out just a little bit, just so that it drops together like that, and that's nice and tight. I can now weld all that up and get a really good weld on there, and that'll be strong enough then to go onto the end of the steering box. We've already done that end. So Harry's bolted those two bits of angle on like that, and then we're going to position that as far back as we can and tack it in, and then look at running the shaft at the front. But we want to make sure that the engine doesn't foul that, so I think we'll probably best chuck the engine on, position this, tack it, and then take the engine back off.
Yep.
Probably ready. Hold your horses. Go on, you scooch it back and I'll lift it.
The whole thing's rolling.
Nice. Yeah, so that's bolted in there, and then you can see there at the minute the column's hitting the engine, or the UJ's hitting the engine, so we know we need to move that around a bit to be able to get it to clear before tacking her in. That's it. That should clear nicely there. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it should be alright. Just whether that's central.
True. So do we need to stick the front bit on first to make sure it moves? We do, don't we? That front shaft.
But we haven't made the front bit yet.
No, we have. Because I don't need to, because it's the same diameter. So we've got the yoke for the other side of the little 90 box, and then some 20mm bright bar, which we're going to use, and they happen to be basically the same size, just with a little bit of... And there we go. So that can be welded up. So we're going to chuck that in the chassis. Harry's already pre-drilled those two holes in the front there, one of which was an existing hole which is just opened out, and then the other one in front of it matches. So we're going to chuck that in there, make sure we've got the box central before tacking in the steering box unit. Come a bit more, mate. Look, look. Whoa. And sit. That's down.
Eyes.
So Harry's tacked that in. You can't see because you're all the way on the roof. Harry's tacked that steering box in, so we're just going to lift the engine out of the way and check it all. And then in those little yokes were keyways, so we're going to put the keyways in, steer the steering, make sure that that shaft out the front actually turns. Ready?
Yep.
Let's trip over some stuff.
Yep.
Just give that a tap.
They go all the way back behind those collars.
Yeah, just tap that on.
Yep.
Right, so that steers now. Nice. Beautiful. Super strong. That's working how we want it to, with the box mounted, our UJ setup, clears the engine, runs out the front. We know the front axle is going to be here somewhere. We're not going to bother cutting this bar until we know where we need to be cutting it. We might even stick a bearing on this end so it's not just running through this steel here. We'll probably just stick a bearing on this end somewhere. But that is functioning steering. Almost. I am going to get on now with extending the chassis, because we know we're moving the front axle. When it's done, we're moving the front axle forward, so we need somewhere to mount it to. So I'm going to extend the front of the chassis using angle iron. So I've cut up some angle iron to basically run over the top, make a frame at the front, and just extend this a few 100mm. So I'm just going to cut off some bits, prep it all up, tack these in place before going mad and welding. Okay, let's stick this engine back in the hole then. Yep. I'll try and lift it back if we can. Nice. Next bit of the project then, obviously now I've extended the chassis this way, we can get a front axle in there. We've already started building a front axle, or the swivels for it, which I'll tell you about later because I haven't done the other side. So when we do the other side, we'll video it and it'll make a load more sense, but just pretend it's not there. But it is. So grab that, and then we marked, that's where we're going to cut it, so drag it your way. So basically we're going to set up where we want the axle. We've decided to move it 200mm forward from the end of the chassis, and I've marked that 200mm on the new chassis piece. So we're just going to centre it with where we want it in relation to the back axle, because the idea was we were going to have this inside of this tyre match the inside of the rear tyre. Is that right? Or the outside?
I think so, inside.
Something like that. Obviously the rear's wider, with wider wheels. But then we need to make sure that we can get the full steering angle and not be where your feet are when you're in there. So we're just going to figure out spacing and where we want it and how wide we want it essentially, and to maximise the steering angle. So we did mark on here the centre line. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, about there. And then bring her forward to there. Yeah. So when you put it on full lock at that, Harry, and I hold it where we want it. So that's at full lock. It gives us a ton of steering angle. And then if you look at where the foot pedals are over there, when your foot's on, obviously we've still got pedals to go on there, but when your foot's on there, it's far enough away from the wheel, which is not driving, to be fair, so it's not like going to suck you in or anything, but it's far enough away to be as safe as this is going to be. So that's where our axle needs to go. Okay, we're going to cut that tube now. We know how wide we want the axle, and then we'll be able to mount it on there and go from there. Axle tube cut, still warm. So we need to, that's where we want to mount it, directly on top of that. So we just need to weld it there. So what I'm thinking is, with a couple of bits of angle iron, if we tack that in there, oh, that's still warm. Roll it up to there, and then that gives us something to weld the tube to. Do the same the other side, and voila, we'll have an axle tube welded to the chassis. It's not going to go anywhere, be good and strong, and then we can go with our swivels off the either end. Well, yeah. Axle mounted, tube mounted rather, and then we've got that one hub that doesn't exist mounted, and we can steer and get maximum lock. Once the pedals are in place, this is technical, once the pedals are in place, our feet will have a good amount of space away from the wheel. We're also going to build a guard anyway, so that'll be good. Need those socks. So yeah, I'm quite pleased with how that looks. How that's sitting, it'll be plenty strong enough. That tube, it's thick wall tube as well, so that's going to be way strong enough. Obviously we've got no suspension, so when it does do a wheelie, which it will do a wheelie, it's going to come down hard on that. So we do want this end to be quite strong, and we'll probably gusset the chassis back as well, so that we don't end up with it being all bent, but that's pretty cool, isn't it? Come here then. Okay, so for the front hub, or for the swivel and basically mounting the front wheels, essentially we need to create a knuckle or a swivel that's going to accept that unit bearing, so something we can bolt that to, that then will swivel as well for the steering.